Hi, everyone. Welcome to Journey 38. Today, I'm joined by Sara Raymond for, I think, a topic that I haven't touched on a lot and maybe, a different realm that I haven't specifically gone into a lot. So I'm really excited for this conversation and really excited that we got connected, Sarah.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to see where the conversation goes as well.
For sure. And, I always just love hearing a little bit about you. And so if you can just give a, quick story of, call it who you are, where you're from, like what you do, how you got to where you are today, anything that kind of comes to mind there.
Sure. Well, I'm located in Maryland, right between Baltimore and DC. I live here with my husband and two children, and I, at the moment, my primary job, I guess, my career is around hypnotherapy and transformational coaching. Although I definitely have had a kind of a road to get here. After I graduated college, I started teaching kindergarten. Was my very first like career. And then shortly after that, I had my first child. And so, childcare is very expensive. And so I basically would have been paying my teaching salary to have her go to childcare. And really, I wanted to be able to stay home and take care of her myself. So
Mhm.
I stopped teaching and I stopped teaching kindergarten, and then I started teaching more adult movement. So I went into the Pilates and yoga world, and I taught that. I currently still teach. So I guess that's been about 18 years now, 17, 18 years. And then along the way, as I was teaching, I was finding myself feeling a little unfulfilled, a little kind of stuck, and just looking for. It wasn't that I was looking for a different job or a different career. I just was looking for more, I guess, overall satisfaction.
Okay.
Um, and that's when I really went down the road of meditation. And at the time, it was like self hypnosis. Um, and then I found that it really supported me in discovering who I was and what was important to me, and really how to find fulfillment from within. And being that I just am a teacher at heart, I wanted to help others do the same. So I went down the road of kind of training to be a meditation teacher as well as a hypnotherapist. So that's kind of the route that I took to get to where I am today.
Awesome. And kind of backing up there, because I think there's a lot of
Yep.
really interesting points of, coming out of college. I'm curious, your thoughts around teaching. Was it,
Mm.
was it something that you had always wanted to do and you thought, like, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? I'm going to be teaching kindergarten or children or whatever it might have
Mhm.
been. Or was it something that you kind of just fell into? And then once you had your first child, it was just, okay, this is an opportunity for me to maybe do something else.
That's a good question. I think that I have always been somewhat maternal in nature. When I was very young, I would babysit children in the neighborhood. My first job was at a child care facility in a gym. And then I've always just worked with kids, and I think I'm a little bit of a kid myself at heart. So I get along with children really well. So I think originally, as I was entering college, I thought that I was going to be a pediatrician. So yes, working with children. And then, of course, my first college science class was a rude awakening. And I was like, nope,
Yeah.
that's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And so I went down the route of early childhood education. And I just love children. As I said, I just connect with them really well. Um, so teaching was the easy, not easy, but it was the logical next step for me if I wasn't going to become a pediatrician. So and as I had more experience in teaching, I really found that I loved it. And to connect with the children and make a difference in their life was really a powerful experience for me.
Mhm.
um, and my daughter was a surprise,
Yeah.
very, very welcome surprise. So 1 year out of into my teaching career, I found out that I was pregnant, and she really changed my life a lot. I was 22 at the time when she was born, so I was very young, and I was really just kind of like thrown into parenthood. And looking back, I don't think I would change anything. She's taught me so much, and
Yeah.
really is a wonderful, wonderful addition. She's 18 now, so like she is now the age that I was when I met my husband, which is very weird to have this experience as a parent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she taught me a lot, and she kind of forced me to be a grown up,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, because I had to take care of her, and so I think when a lot of people are in their early 20s, they're kind of figuring out who they are as a person. They're figuring out what they want to do with their life, what's important to them, their values. I didn't really have that opportunity.
Yeah.
I was just like thrown into parenthood and had to take care of this, tiny human. And so I didn't really get that opportunity at that age in my life. I had friends that were like, "Oh, come out to the bar with me." And I'm like, "No, because I have to get up in the middle of the night and feed a baby." And
Yeah.
excuse me. So I had that experience in my early 30s when my kids were a little bit older and they didn't really have um, quite as much like dependence on me.
Yeah.
That was when I was like, okay, what am I doing here with my life?
Yeah.
And at the time I wasn't back to teaching kids, but I was teaching adults, which is fairly similar.
Yes.
They're adults, but they're still like classroom management and connecting with people on a level that it's almost like I always say I have to meet someone where they are for
Yeah.
them to really receive whatever I am giving to them. And those are lessons that I learned in my education of teaching children that I was able to take into teaching adults. Um, so I think I may have gotten off track a little bit, but
It's okay. It's a good tangent. Yeah.
but like I think the question was about teaching children, and my maternal nature
Hmm.
has been taken from teaching children into working with adults, because I think ultimately, we're all human, and we have a need for a maternal connection. And so that's a long story to get to that
Oh, for
that
sure.
point.
It's interesting too, especially in specific environments where you see a lot of those childlike behaviors and tendencies even come out as we're
Mhm.
adults. And I don't know how much it comes up in your practices, but seeing people either act out or, for lack of a better term, have little mini temper tantrums, or, not believe in themselves that they can actually do it. And
Yeah.
they need that like almost caring support to get there, whatever it might be. Of it's, yes, they're children or they're adults, but there's so many similarities that I imagine you've seen a lot of as well.
Yeah, I think that when we get triggered by an event that reminds us of some belief that was formed when we were children, it's almost like we, even though we're adults, we are reacting to the situation as if we were the age of that child.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. And it's like, wait, why did I just behave like that? That's not who I am
Yeah.
today. But we like time travel. We go back to whatever age that original belief was formed, and then we react um, as if we were that age. So yeah, it definitely happens a lot.
For sure. And I even think that that's an extra step of, it's good when people start asking like, why did I act like that?
Mm,
I find that a lot of times, and for most of my life as well, there was no even question about it. It was no, this is how I react. That's just
Hmm.
how it is. And like not really even looking into it at all. And as I started
Hmm.
doing work on myself and looking back on them and realizing that a lot of my responses and a lot of my thoughts were actually formed as like a young child, and I had made decisions about my life, about what I thought about myself, about who I was, about certain
Yeah.
situations and what they meant, and I'd carried them all the way in to my life as a young adult. And it wasn't until I started questioning those that I went, oh, wait a minute, like I
Hmm.
don't need to react this way, or like why
Right.
am I reacting that way? Where is this coming from? I know it's not about this specific situation. This is a,
Right.
sometimes big reaction, or why does this seem so heavy or hit me so hard when it's, when
Hmm.
looking at it from an outside view, it's not a big thing. But for me, it's huge. It seems massive, and looking into what that's actually triggering and what that's bringing up.
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point that the the curiosity, the questioning of like, why did I respond to that, is what gives you the capacity or the freedom to say, okay, well, I don't really need to respond like that anymore because this is about from, my childhood. And I think that that awareness is so, so powerful and useful. But it is a skill to practice and to learn and improve for sure. Because when we get emotional and heated in the middle of like a debate or an argument with a loved one, it can be so challenging to step back and pause and say, okay, you know, I see what's happening. I see that this is triggering, the child in me, the person who, like, for me, it's always about uh not being heard or seen.
Hmm.
Like, that's one of my triggers. So like in conversations or arguments with my husband, that's usually what sets me off, and then I start to act like my 10-year-old self,
Yeah.
which is not how I want to show up in my marriage. But um being able to ask yourself that question, like you said, like, well, what is this really about, is really the first step to being able to make those changes.
For sure. And I'm curious for you specifically, when were you able to start noticing those things, or when did you start looking into those? And obviously, as somebody who's done a lot of work on themselves, you can say that my triggers are when I'm not feeling seen, when I'm not feeling heard. It takes a long time to get there, and to be able to see it and realize it and take a lot of the emotion away from it. What was your journey like getting
Mm.
to that place, and how did you do it?
I think I was always very self-aware, but I don't necessarily think I used it in the best way.
Okay.
Uh,
What do you mean by that?
so like I was a button pusher as a
Ah,
child. Like, I have an older brother and a younger brother. We're all three very close in age. So I was the middle. I was the only girl, and I was the one that would like instigate fights, or
yeah.
like, I could see how to get under their skin, and so I would do it, and it's not something that I'm proud of, and but I can admit now as an adult, and my brothers will definitely tell you that I was the one that would, I would start the fights, I would instigate the arguments, but then I would find a way to like get them in trouble for it.
Yeah.
So I did not always use this power for good. But then as I got older, I was able to take that into more of a self-aware state. But as I mentioned before, I didn't spend my early 20s like using that ability. I think I was just doing whatever I needed to do to make sure that my children were taken care of, and basic needs were met. I don't know if you have any children, but it's like you just have to do what you need to do to get by, because
Mhm.
it's a lot of work and effort, and it's even hard to just find time to like take a shower or take take care of yourself. So I didn't really use that self-awareness until probably my early 30s.
Mhm.
um, and most of it was through meditation and hypnosis, and I did a lot of journaling. Like for me, I was spending a lot of time just up in my head trying to like logically solve my problems when really they were emotional and I needed to kind of get out of my head. And journaling was a way to do that for me. It doesn't work for everyone, but and also movement, like, you know, anything, walking, yoga, Pilates, any like mindful based movement is another way that I would say I am able to like drop into that self-awareness a little bit more easily. I think I've just always been a very like kinesthetic person.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the practices that I would say that I've used to get to know myself a little better, I guess.
Yeah, no, amazing. And, did you kind of have somebody that you looked to that exposed you to some of those practices, or was it
Mm.
research that you just did on your own, or was it almost more intuitive of just, I feel drawn to these almost, movement practices. And then, I feel like a lot of those are kind of tied together, and a lot of people that, do one of them will also have either knowledge or do some other things. For you, how did you find those things?
I I found them probably a combination of different ways.
Okay.
Uh, but I needed to be ready for the lessons, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So as I mentioned, for the last 17, 18 years, I've been teaching Pilates and yoga. And I, for the longest time, was the non-spiritual yoga teacher. Like I approached my training in a way that like avoided the spirituality because it was uncomfortable for me. So when I was first taught about meditation, I didn't get it. I wasn't ready to like really receive the lessons. Growing up, we were not a religious family. My mom was Jewish, my dad was Catholic. We just didn't have religion. It
Yeah.
was like, nope, we're just gonna pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So like spirituality to me felt like part of religion. And so I was just very uncomfortable with it. I would just didn't know a lot about it. I felt like it kind of scared me a little bit.
Mhm.
So I approached my teacher training in a way that was like, I'm just going to learn how to do the quote exercises of yoga. And that's what I did. And that's how I taught for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, I was actually in a yoga class myself as a student. And I had this like, um, just like breaking open of my emotions. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but a lot of times movement will move energy, like physical movement, physical exercise moves energy in your body. And so for me, it was just a release of energy in the form of like tears, which was really bizarre for me because I was like in the middle of a yoga class and I'm crying and I'm like, what's happening here? Um, so for me, that was like my aha moment where I needed to explore that a little bit more. And it was like that allowed me to be ready to have the lessons of like the spiritual side of yoga and the meditation side of yoga. Um, but it was like probably a good 5 years into my actually teaching yoga before I was ready to have the full experience of it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's always,
yeah.
yeah, it's always interesting the aversions that we'll have to specific things. And again, a lot of times it goes back to us growing up. And
Hmm.
yeah, for me, I think why I had a big aversion to the spiritual side of things was very similar of,
Hmm.
my family wasn't necessarily religious, but I went to Catholic school for basically my entire life. And so I was
Hmm.
exposed to religion, I was exposed to Catholicism, and a very rigid view.
Mm.
These are specific boxes that you're put into. You're either Catholic or you're Christian or you're Jewish or whatever you might be. And this is
Yeah.
the box. And it seemed like everybody, if you weren't in my box, if you weren't on my team, you were against me or you were wrong. And so
Hmm.
I'd always kind of just stayed away from it because I went, well, I like some things from here and some things from there, and I don't like that, and I like this, and I don't like that one. But that didn't seem to be, quote unquote, allowed. And so, because of that same sort of thing, just for me, it was the version of, well, I just don't even want to get into it, or
Hmm.
oh, it just, it's spirituality is something for just to comfort you or to make you feel better, but it doesn't do anything. And those are the kind of stories that would go on in my brain. But over the last couple of years, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a spiritual person. However, being open to that and seeing the different sides of it and how, wide and beautiful it can be and how so many different people approach it so many different ways.
Yeah, like that freedom of not being in the box,
Yes,
right? Not having to fit inside of a label, um, is really beautiful.
for
Yeah,
sure. Um,
yeah.
and so kind of backing up a little bit again, I'm curious, you talked about you didn't necessarily have the time or call it even mental space to really explore, call it what you wanted to do or different things because like you said, you have this child now that you need to take care of.
Mhm.
Like there's no there's no, oh, I'll take a break for a week and
Yeah.
it's you're taking care of them. But once you hit that point where you're like, what, something's missing or I want to make a change, whatever that feeling was for you, do you remember, was it a very specific moment or was it more of a building up of over
Mm.
time you slowly felt that build up of like something's off, like, and whether that's, you were feeling stuck or whether just like not fulfilled or whatever it might have been. um yeah, if you could just expand on that a little bit, maybe some of the feelings that were coming up and if there was a specific moment or if it was more that build up that allowed you to take that leap into something else.
I think it was a combination of both. I There was definitely a building up to a point where, I was taking like every single training I could possibly take because I felt like I wasn't as good of an instructor as I could be. Um, I was always looking for like external validation of my enoughness or my goodness, if you will. Um, and it just was never, it was never enough. Like I always felt like, oh, I need this other training. I need this other education. I need to work with this other coach. Um, and then I had one mentor who, um, she probably was like involved in like the moment that turned everything, right? And it was like she she asked me to understand or ask myself in a way why I was doing what I was doing. Like, well, why are you a Pilates instructor? And there was all these like layers of why. And no one had ever asked me that, right? Like, why do I do what I do? It was just all about the hows and the specifics. Um, and I think that was really a turning point because it allowed me to understand my intention as the instructor that I was and like what my purpose was or my reasoning for doing what I was doing. And when I could understand my why basically, then I could see that okay, well, I am reaching those goals that I've set for myself, or I am doing what I'm setting forth to do. I am helping people. I am making a difference. And so then I felt like I could stop the external seeking of enoughness or of more. And it was really a turning point for me to have confidence in the fact that I was enough and I was doing a good job because I understood like how to measure that for myself.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, it was like a building up, until I had that moment of like just realization or recognition, um, that it's all within, and
Yeah.
it is enough.
Yeah. No, very cool. And I think like for me, that was my biggest struggle. Like my biggest struggle was accepting the fact that I am enough because as
Mhm.
I'm me, essentially. I don't need
Yeah,
to do anything. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to achieve anything. That just being me is enough. And that was a
yeah.
very long and very difficult journey, one that I still am far from fully conquering, but have made lots of really good
Mhm.
progress. Um, and I think it's so funny that almost like what you said earlier, being seen, being heard, for me thinking that I'm enough is a lot of people, from what I've seen at least, have the same sort of core things that they struggle with. They present very, very differently in all of our
Mhm.
lives, and the details are very different. Why we think that is very different. But it really, I truly do believe that it comes down to, call it 7 to, you know, 10 major core beliefs about ourselves that
Mhm.
we end up struggling with.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, with everything that you just said, right? They show up for different reasons, and they show up in different ways, for sure.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of what I do with the hypnotherapy process, is to look at events from the past that might have caused you to develop these specific beliefs that become the foundation of all of our experience. And when you can look back at a specific event, and like I said, when we get triggered and we kind of time travel back to that age, when you can understand why you might have come up with this belief, why you might have formed it, because generally all of these beliefs are there to help you in some way. And when you can see that, okay, I was 10 years old and this thing happened to me that caused me to believe that I'm not good enough, and that belief drove me to like want to do more, learn more, be more successful, get all these like credentials and accolades. So in a way, that belief has helped me. However, now it's causing me to feel unfulfilled and stuck and whatever other, things it's causing me to feel. Then I can say, okay, well, I understand where it came from. I was 10 years old. It was serving a purpose. It was helping me, but now it's not true anymore, right? Because look at all these things that I've accomplished. Look at all of these ways that I am enough. And so now that I'm an adult and I can see that, I'm ready to let go of that. And like you said, it's kind of a continual work in progress, but having that understanding is so powerful in making big strides and progress towards that ultimate belief that really that you are enough as you are, just because of who you are.
For sure. And, I think that's a really important point, and one that I struggled to, struggled with, for myself,
Hmm.
is that, you can have these events or circumstances or whatever they might be, that really, either cause trauma or cause a lot of pain, or, cause you to live a certain way. And learning to love those is very difficult. And so
Hmm.
for myself, it's funny when you were talking earlier about you knew how to push people's buttons. And, I think that really that almost comes from a place of like empathy, in the sense of understanding how they're
Mm,
feeling. You understand how they feel, so you know what would either really bug them, or where they're coming from, whatever it might be. And so for me, growing up, I was kind of the mediator of the family, and
mm,
I would jump in, and when there was fights, it was okay. I would go mediate. I would be the person that each member of my family needed to be, uh, to uplift them or to make them feel better,
yeah.
whatever it might have been. And having a lot of anger towards that as I started looking into it, of, oh, well, that meant that I had to abandon myself for most of my life, and that's just what I defaulted into.
Hmm.
And switching that thinking and going, well, no, and I refer to it as my superpowers now. And, you know, one of my superpowers is being able to deeply empathize with people because of those experiences, understand,
Mm,
you know, what they enjoy, what they like, and be able to connect with them because of those
yeah.
experiences. And you can take those positives and work on trying to release a lot of the negatives that came along with that. And, you know, the same one for me was, for all of my life, I've always been a worker, right? And some people might say workaholic, but, you know, I had done a lot, I would work a lot. And it led me to a lot of um, professional success. However, as I looked into it, I realized that it's coming from a place of, and I think similar to you and your story a little bit, of trying to prove myself to other people and try to prove that worth, and
Yeah.
trying to do good by them, whatever it might have been. And so again, it was trying to reconcile the, well, I've learned so much, I've achieved a lot, especially for my age. However, it's not sustainable. I don't want that to be the driving factor. And actually looking at a lot of the things, and do I want to do this, or am I doing it for other people?
Yeah. I think it's really beautiful that you have been able to kind of reframe what might have been initially seen as like a negative role or a negative part of you, and reframe it into something that, like you said, is your superpower and has really been supporting you. I think that, you know, a lot of people could learn from that, and I think it's really beautiful. So I applaud you for that. Wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
the part I always remind people is, like, it took a lot of pain to get there. It took a lot of work to get there, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
You know, I want to dig into a little bit more of the hypnotherapy side of things,
Okay.
because one, I just love, I think that you said you started with self hypnotherapy,
Hmm.
or self hypnotism, whatever the term was that you used.
Yep.
And then you started branching out. And so, again, just curious on how you found it. And then if you could just even go more into it, because I think a lot of times when people hear, you know, hypnotherapy, they automatically jump to the, oh, it's, you know, at a party and they hypnotize you to do funny things.
Right.
But there's so much more than that. I'd love for you to just kind of expand on that as well.
Sure. Um, well, what you're describing is stage hypnosis, and it is for entertainment purposes, and that is definitely not the type of hypnosis that I practice. Um, but I think that I got into hypnosis. Well, if I could just kind of use meditation as a way to understand hypnosis, because I
For
think
sure.
meditation is a little bit more maybe mainstream or understood. And it's basically, meditation is a very relaxed state of your nervous system. And there's lots of different forms of meditation, but generally we're using something as a focal point, like breath is a very, very common focal point because it's always with us. And there's a sense of being present in meditation, right? It's just the state of being. And hypnosis is the same exact state in terms of like a relaxed nervous system. The brain waves are the same, but there's more of a goal in mind. Like you are actually doing something instead of simply being. So it's extremely safe and, you know, good for you, just like meditation, but you have a purpose in mind. And whether you're doing it on your own to make a change in your beliefs or your um, thoughts about yourself, or you're working with a professional that might be looking into helping you to change some aspect of yourself or address some specific issue, but you're actually like working towards a goal,
Mm.
whereas in meditation it's really about just being. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the difference and the similarities.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so my first like understanding of hypnosis was I was introduced to it by my mom. She used hypnosis to quit smoking
Mm.
many years ago, obviously. and it worked really well for her. And she used it again for some weight reduction over the years. So it was something that I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll try. She did it. It worked for her. Why not? And my first experience with hypnosis was really just listening to like recordings.
Mhm.
So it was kind of generic in a way that would allow me to build confidence. That was kind of what I was using it for. And it helped. It supported me. And then this is just my nature. I like something, and so I want to teach it. So I went right into a training, and I learned more about like how the mind works, and how hypnosis works. And it was pretty fascinating. And then I was like, okay, let's do it. I want to try it. And I recruited some people to be my first clients,
Yeah.
and it went well. I think my, again, sort of maternal nature, it suited me very well in terms of helping people and supporting them. And so I worked with myself, I worked with others, and then I found another training that allowed me to use memory regression.
Mhm.
And that's where I think I really learned how to truly help people. And in that, we look at, like I said, scenes from our past experiences so that we can understand where the beliefs came from. And that's the type of hypnotherapy that I practice now, is that, we'll have a dialogue going during the session. And really what I'm doing is guiding your subconscious to look at events from the past and look at different parts of you that might have beliefs that could be getting in the way, or kind of stuck emotions that need to be like let go of or unburdened, so that you can make the changes that you want.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
no,
very cool.
yeah, it's, as soon as I saw it, it was just I'm a very curious person. And so I just always love learning about them, and, trying so many different things, and, seeing what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what other people have. And yeah, no, so thank you for sharing that.
Sure, yeah.
Now it's a little off topic, but one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I think that you have done some work around it, is living your life around shoulds,
Mm,
of allowing those shoulds to dictate what you do, what kind of life you have. And as I started doing this work, that was one thing I realized, that I think for me specifically, I did live my life of, oh, this is what I should do, this is how I should act.
mhm.
And as I started digging into it, I realized just how many people do that. Of sometimes
Yeah.
they know exactly what they want to do or what they would be doing, but it's not what they
Mhm.
should be doing. And so therefore they ignore it or push it down or fight against it, whatever it might be. And so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on, why you think it's dangerous to live your life according to shoulds,
Mhm.
and any advice, I would call it, that you have for people to either look at it and see if that's how they're living their life, or if they know that's how they're living their life, how to break out of it.
Sure. I think words definitely carry a lot of energy and meaning. And so there are definitely certain words that kind of like prick my attention, and should is one of them. And
Mhm.
it hasn't always, but definitely it does now. So anytime I find myself thinking, oh, this is what I should be doing, I have to pause and assess where that should is coming from, because there's this sort of underlying um, expectation that's attached with anything that you feel like you should do, whether it's your expectation or someone else's. That's the part that is important to get curious about.
Mm.
um, I mean, I grew up in a house that it was just expected that you graduate from high school, you go to college, you get a job, you have a family, all of these things were just, this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
I was raised in a suburb that was like one of the first planned communities in Maryland, and that was just like what was expected. You did these things, and so that's what I did. And then, as I said, my daughter was a surprise, so that's not what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But my family was very supportive, and uh but yeah, so I did live definitely by the shoulds for a long time. And then it was that same period of time, like my early 30s, where it was like, well, how did I get here? Did I even want to get here? And like, what role did I really have in getting here? And that was a really kind of pivotal period of my life. And that was probably the first time I ever noticed or became aware of the fact that I was doing these things because I felt like I should. Like,
Yeah.
is that my mom's voice in my head when I'm making this decision? Or is it my husband's voice? Or like, it was not my voice.
Yeah.
And when I figured that out, then I could start to say, okay, I need to make this big decision, whatever it is, get those voices that are not mine out of my head for a little while. And that's not to say like I won't take advice from people, but I can hear their advice and also hear my own beliefs and then decide if their advice is good for me or not. But that definitely didn't come easily. And I still probably struggle with like when making decisions, like, well, what should I do? Or what really is the best decision for me?
Yeah.
And at this point, I have to make decisions that are good for my family as well. So all of those things considered. But anytime I hear the word should in my sort of thought process, it's like, okay, wait a second. Let's just take a pause and be curious and really understand what's important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those are two really huge things that stuck out for me. And the first one was, whose voice is it actually? And as I started to
Mm,
question that and look into that, that helped me a lot of going, oh, like, yeah, you're right. This isn't actually my voice. This is somebody else's voice,
mhm.
my parents, my, family, my friend, whatever it might have been. And that was a
Yeah.
very interesting one. But the other thing that you said that I haven't thought about before is the difference on, is this a should coming from outside external sources from people,
Mm,
or is this a should that I'm placing on myself?
mhm.
Because I've never made the distinction before. And so that's really interesting. I need to think about that a little bit because I think there are a lot of shoulds that we just place on ourselves. So sometimes nobody in our life has told us that that is what you quote unquote should do, but this is what we've decided for
Mm.
ourselves. This is the person that I should be.
Yeah, I think that's it happens a lot. And perhaps, we live in this world of the highlight reels on social media. And so there's constant comparison, looking at like other people that are your peers or celebrities
Mhm.
or, influencers. We have so much information coming in that we're using to kind of not regulate our life, but to filter our decisions through.
Mhm.
And it's hard. It's a lot of information. Yeah.
It is. And it never stops is the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so being able to quiet in, and I think, similar to what you were saying, is be able to take pieces of information, whether that's other people's feelings, whether that's other people's needs, what they think you should do. But separating that of like, I can take that as information to
Mm.
inform my own decision. And I think that's the important part. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like when you have like multiple plants that have roots that are intertwined and you're trying to like pick them apart and see like which roots are attached to which plant,
yeah,
or like I just keep think of like intermesh or enmeshment, right?
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
We are running out of time here. And I was curious, is there anything that we didn't get to that you'd like to talk about or bring up or ask or anything like that?
No, I mean, I guess if I could just offer some like takeaway or a
Yeah,
piece of advice that you could take action on without having to like do anything other than hear this podcast is
for sure.
um, to to take the skill of self-awareness, and the practice of self-awareness, if you will, and use it to support your goals. So like we talked a lot about being aware, being self-aware, and if you would take one thing away from this conversation is to use that to support you. So like taking pauses when having uh, interactions with others that might be heated or emotional, like don't be afraid to pause and use that moment to self-assess or be self-aware. That would be my takeaway if I could offer that.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so
It's
much for
like
that.
a really important pause.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then so if people want to follow you or get connected with you, anything like that, where would the best places for them to do that be?
Well, all of my free content is available on our YouTube channel, The Mindful Movement, or themindfulmovement.com is the website that kind of houses the hub of all of our courses and articles and videos. Everything is there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. A lot of takeaways for myself. Yeah, and I'm just so grateful for you to be on here.
Well, thank you. And I think that I would just acknowledge you for your, it sounds like a lot of work that you've done for yourself. And you have a very like high emotional intelligence, it seems. So it was really nice to connect with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the kind words.
Yeah.